Um, Postmodernism, as made obvious by the name, is the literary period after modernism, and that ended after the Second World War, and it's also the period that we are in now. And it mainly came around as a reaction to modernism. Some of the basic characteristics that are included in postmodernism are that it displayed fear, and that's a large part of that's because of the Cold War and a constant fear of being attacked by the Russians, and also kind of McCarthyism and that whole fear of being labeled a communist and being arrested. And it also was depressing in many ways, just like modernism, and it used lots of imagery, and there was an overall loss of individuality, and that was and also there was a flawed hero, according to Mr. Langley. Some of the big reasons for postmodernism were the Vietnam War, which scared people and also kind of showed them the darker side of life, and the fear of the Cold War, and also the loss of individuality due to the rise of technologies like the internet that kind of gave people fear of the government spying into their lives and the big government controlling them, which is also kind of the reason for the Unabomber and also the bombing of the Federal Building in the 90s. That was a big part of it. And really only one of the books that I compared made mention of religion, and that was World War Z. But the two books that I did compare are World War Z and Ender's Game, and both have characteristics of postmodernism, and in both of them fear is a big player, and also a flawed hero is present in both. The first book, World War Z, is a fiction about the end of the world through a zombie apocalypse, and there's obviously a large amount of fear written into the book, and the author writes it as an oral interview, so he asks a few questions and the people being interviewed respond, and that's the entire story. But each of the interviewees expresses a lot of fear over what happened to them, obviously because they had to survive or be eaten alive by the undead. And also, a lot of them are also pretty deeply flawed, because their survival really depended on leaving emotion behind and doing whatever it took to survive, and a lot of times that's pretty gruesome, or things they did weren't what a hero would normally do. This book was kind of, he wrote it after his first thing, which was the Zombie Survival Guide, and that was written in response to 9/11 and the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon, and he was kind of making fun of all of the end-of-the-world survivalists that were writing survival guides in preparation for the end of the world. Religion is a big part in this book. He writes about how a lot of people flock to churches searching for salvation and hoping to be saved by their God, but they ended up dying because nothing happened, they weren't saved, and that really made people lose faith in religion and kind of changed how people viewed religion. And also, many people in this book express how hopeless their life was during this thing, because they thought they were going to die, and their entire world was being changed. And that really helped to attribute to the total loss of faith and hope, as in many postmodernism works. The second book, which is Ender's Game, has an underlying current of fear as well, but instead of aliens, this is fear of... Instead of zombies, this is fear of aliens. They had already attacked once, so they were scared of a second alien invasion. So they take children who are super smart and train them to lead space armadas to take the fight back to the aliens. But the book follows Ender, who loses a lot of his carefree attitude during intense training in orbit around Earth, and he kind of loses hope during this time, because things are just going so bad and there's really nothing to look forward to. And that's like what happens in many other postmodern works. He has a habit of overdoing things as well. He kills 2 classmates, even though it's accidentally, and both times it was in defense. It still haunts him for the rest of the book and the book series, and he can never really forgive himself for doing it, even though it was an accident and in self-defense. So everything he does is kind of overshadowed by that in his mind, and that's another trait of postmodernism with the flawed hero. And it doesn't really touch much on religion, but if it did, I'm sure it would be about people losing faith in it. The two really start to split apart when it comes to individuality. In Ender's Game, he's in the military, and the point being, it pretty much destroys his individuality, like the main point of the military. And while World War Z, if anything, is the exact opposite. The way the subjects are interviewed really serves to set them apart from each other, and how they give their stories of surviving alone, and really individualism is the only thing that saved them most of the time. And really, to finish off, the biggest thing the two have in common is fear. Whether it's from zombies or aliens, fear is the same.